Exam 4 is going to have 5 questions from exam 1, 5 questions from exam 2, and 5 questions from exam 3. So 15 questions of old material, literally the exact same question, verbatim, nothing new, so I'm not going to throw anything new at you. So you should be able to recognize those quite easily.
When you say verbatim, is it like also from the quizzes, like the lecture quizzes?
It's literally 5 questions from exam 1, 2, and 3. Like literally copied and pasted from exam 1. So if you recognize it, like it'll be the same answer it was the first time you took the quiz or took the exam. Yeah, it'll be exactly the same. We ran out of time this semester. Normally, like, I'm usually like coasting into the final exam. Like usually, like we have time to watch like a video or two. There's a really good video I always like to show. It's called "The Science of Sex Appeal." Unfortunately, we ran out of time to watch that.
You said it's the science of sex appeal?
Science of Sex Appeal.
Is that on YouTube?
Huh?
Is it on YouTube?
You might be able to find it on YouTube, yeah. Because it gives me a chance to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is sexual selection. Who's here for sexual selection?
Is that just how you choose your mate?
So yes, right. So a lot of human, the way humans look is not right. So what's natural selection, guys?
Just your ability to survive?
Right, survival of the fittest, right? So in a given environment, right there, yeah. So Darwin basically said, look, in any environment, there is a finite amount of resources, right? And populations, right, basically breed, right, unlimited amounts, right? So you have unlimited amounts of species competing for a finite amount of resources, which means what? Not everybody is going to get enough of what they need to survive, right? So in a particular environment, certain inheritable traits make particular portions of that population better able to survive and reproduce offspring in greater numbers. So for example, right, we believe at one point in the Arctic, right, was populated by brown bears, right? Bears just kept migrating north and north and north, and they moved into the Arctic area, right? And then at some point, there was a mutation leading to, right, albino bears, which is basically polar bears, right? Like, why are there only polar bears in the Arctic now? They were better suited for the polar environment, right? That's why we find polar bears in the Arctic, but we don't find them, right, in like, Scandinavia, right? So brown bears blend in much better into forests, not so much into snow, okay? So that explains a lot of evolution. But, so for example, the peacock, right? Does their brightly colored plumage increase survivability? In fact, it actually does the opposite. It literally makes them stick out like a sore thumb. So why do male peacocks have such bright plumage?
To get the attention of females.
To get the attention of females. So that's been an example of sexual selection, right? So a lot of what we think of like why humans look the way we do. So like one of the questions we've been asking for a long time is, why aren't humans hairy like our primate cousins? Right? Why are we basically hairless compared to our primate cousins? And we think, and why do we have like some of the facial features? And why, more importantly, did different facial characteristics and structures develop in different parts of the world? Like why do people from South America look different than people from Northern Europe who look different from Aborigines and blah, blah, blah. And we think a large part of that has to do with mate selection, right? So over time, for whatever reason, our ancestors preferred to breed with the less hairy versions of us, leading over time to us being mostly hairless, right? So there's a lot of science into like why. So ladies, do you prefer men with high pitched voices or low pitched voices? Low pitched voices. Do you prefer men with narrow shoulders or broad shoulders? Broad shoulders. Do you prefer men with ovular faces or square jawlines? Square jawline. Why do you prefer that, ladies?
Because we're built that way.
You just do, right? So What is, right, so, gentlemen, deep voices or high voices for ladies? Higher voices, right? Narrow shoulders or broad shoulders? Narrow shoulders. Square jawlines or ovular jawlines? Ovular, right? Why do you prefer that, gentlemen? Just do, right? So that's sexual selection, right? So, ladies, what is a deep voice, broad shoulders, muscular torso, square jawline? What does this indicate, ladies? Huh?
They're fertile.
What does that masculinity come from?
High testosterone.
High testosterone. High testosterone indicates what?
They're fertile.
Good fertility and good gene, right? So, ovular face, broad set eyes, narrow waist to hip ratio. What does that indicate in a woman? High levels of progesterone and estrogen increase, indicating high levels of fertility, including and meaning healthy, right? So, right, we're attracted, right? So we used to believe that beauty was in the eye of the beholder, but we find that actually there's a lot of stuff is universal regardless of like culture, right? So like an hourglass shaped woman is appealing in every culture. How big the hourglass is changes a little bit depending on the culture, but every culture, right, the idealized beauty for a woman is some type of an hourglass type of a shape. That's sexual selection, right? So that's not survivability, it's just for whatever reason we prefer these certain types of things. And so when you see, right, so when we say somebody's beautiful, what we're really saying is it's obvious to the eye that this person is got good genetic health. So for example, one of the things we look for in beauty and a facial structure is symmetry. What does symmetry mean?
Even.
Right, so the two sides of the face are symmetrical, right? So, right, and so like, there are specific like metrics. So they're, like for example, you guys can go on, so this, right, so you can go here. You guys are feeling really brave. You can go onto this website here, and you can actually load up, there's a link to it here, you can actually load up your face onto this thing, and it will actually mathematically calculate how attractive your face is.
What was it called?
Using what's called the Marquardt Beauty Mask. Huh?
What was it called?
Marquardt Beauty Mask. So go from there, and then you can find links to it. There's actually websites where you can actually load up a picture of your face, and then it'll actually digitally analyze it, and it'll give you a rating on a scale of 1 to 10. So if you're really feeling brave, you can find out mathematically how attractive you are. The average person's about a 5, so anything over 7 is considered very attractive.
I'm surprised they don't use those on dating apps.
Huh?
I'm surprised they don't put that on dating apps.
Probably will be eventually. Yeah. So yeah. So the Marquardt Beauty Mask is literally like an idealized, like hypothetical, like perfect 10 face. Right? So it would have certain like measures and markers and stuff like that. So like really attractive people are going to be like a 7.5, 8 plus. Yeah. So like anybody know who Nefertiti was? So she's Queen of X. So we have like a bust of what we're pretty sure she looks like. And we've done the math on hers, and her face is like an 8.2 out of 10. So like she would be considered very attractive. Gisele Bündchen's like an 8.5. You guys know who Gisele Bündchen is? Right, used to be married to Tom Brady. You know she was the breadwinner?
Yeah.
She actually made more money than he did. Yeah. Like significantly more money. Yeah. She's worth like $500 million. So, she's like the spokesmodel for like everything in Brazil. She modeled it like okay. Questions do we have, guys? So first off, don't worry about tonsils. You don't need to know the types of tonsils. You don't really need to know how the tongue is involved. Do you know the different tastes though? So the different tastes are sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and umami. Right, so just know that.
No, the
Right,
taste.
what are the two types of movements of the alimentary canal? Mixing and propulsion, right? So right, your alimentary system is going to shake stuff up, and then it's also going to move it through that peristalsis. Okay. Do you know how many primary teeth and secondary teeth you have? You guys remember how many primary teeth you have?
20.
20 primary teeth, and then how many adult teeth?
32.
32, at least you're born with 32. You're supposed to have 32. That friend of mine went to high school, she had like 40 of them.
Ooh.
Yeah, grow in all sorts of ways, yeah. So, she had to get like the heavy duty headgear, so they actually had to like pull her jaw forward a little bit.
You pull a bunch of those out of it, right?
Yeah.
Like that's too many teeth.
Yeah. I mean, you gotta have like seriously like jacked up like jawline to like have to put on the headgear. You guys get to put on the headgear to draw our jaw out a little bit. Yeah. It's like, right?
I thought Invisalign was bad.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. We generally don't do that stuff unless you got like serious, like your jaw's misaligned or something like that.
Yeah.
So.
Most people's jaws are misaligned.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really bad.
Yes, they are.
They change like your whole face shape after you get it fixed. It's really crazy.
Is it because we chew? Like a lot of people chew on one side, or just like?
No, it's just like,
Genetic stuff.
Yeah.
basically, people have an overbite, underbite.
Yeah.
It's like super common.
Which again goes into facial attractiveness, right? So lack of symmetry, like so we've done studies where we've taken somebody's face and we made it more symmetrical, and then we took their face and made it less symmetrical, and then we said they're twins and rate which one's more attractive, and they will always say the more symmetrical person is more attractive, but they oftentimes can't like
Can't say why.
say why, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, they're just more attractive.
Just like a subtle thing.
Okay. You don't really need to know anything about saliva. Only thing you really need to know about teeth is how many teeth there are. Make sure you do know the regions of the pharynx. So you got the oropharynx, nasopharynx, oropharynx, and laryngopharynx. Don't really worry about the major events of swallowing. Do you know what the glottis is and the epiglottis? What's the epiglottis, guys?
It's the flap that closes.
So the glottis is the opening of the trachea, of the larynx, and the epiglottis is the thing that covers it. Do you know, so for example, the enzymes are created by the mucosa of the stomach. So we've got gastrin, right, and hydrochloric acid. Those are produced by the stomach. So chief cells produce the gastrin, and then the other one produces the mucus.
Wait, what produces the mucus?
Huh?
What produces mucus?
So chief cells produce the gastrin, and then it's in the slide. I can't remember the name of it offhand.
Okay.
It's been a long day.
That's fine, I can look it up.
Yeah, but there's one in there. Yeah, but there's like one question about it. Don't sweat it all that much. There isn't a question about the stomach digesting itself, but the answer to that is mucus. Right, your stomach's got a lot of mucus in it. What controls gastric acid secretion? That would be secretin. Function. Make sure you know the function of cholecystokinin, also known as CCK. So in the presence of fat or proteins, it slows down the digestive tract because you need more time to digest like a lot of like meat and fat. Right, this is why like if you eat cotton candy, like that goes through you super quickly. Right? But a 20-ounce steak, that's going to take a while.
Why do people get the meat sweats?
Huh?
Why do people get the meat sweats?
So, okay,
What is
so
that?
meat sweats is caused, so there's what's called the thermic effect of food, right? So, like we talked about, right? So there's chemical and mechanical digestion that happens, right? It takes more work or energy to break down protein than it does anything else. So if you eat like a big old thing of steak, right? Like your core body temperature go up, right? So like the Inuit, the Eskimos, and then I can't remember what the people in northern Finland are called. But they eat a diet. They eat a almost completely like animal-based diet for two reasons. Number one, not a whole lot of plant growing, in the tundra, and number two, like eating reindeer and whale blubber and seal blubber and all that other stuff like that. Right, because of the thermic effect of food, it helps keep them warm. Right. So yeah. So like if you're going to be in a cold environment, yeah. So if you move to Barrow, Alaska, above the Arctic Circle, you might want to consider eating.
I would just die.
Did you Barrow, Alaska?
When they brought the whales up on the beaches, they would hack them up and just eat the skeletons of
Yep.
the huge whale skeleton. But everyone in the village got this thing called mukta.
Yep.
It's a trash bag full of whale blubber.
Yep, with blubber. Yeah.
It's just melted down.
Yeah. Which you're only allowed to eat if you do if you have a X amount of indigenous people in your village. Yeah. So, because they're allowed, and they're the only ones allowed to hunt seals.
Is it just sacred?
Yeah, it's part of their tradition. Yeah. Did you have to deal with any vampires when you were up there in Barrow?
No, I did. No, that's where most people know it.
Yeah. So there was a famous comic book series, and then they made it in a movie called
20 days later is the
30 Days of Night. Yeah. So Barrow, Alaska is above the Arctic Circle, so there's actually a period of time where it's what, like 45, 50 days?
Yeah,
that there's,
it's like a couple months.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like from beginning of November to like the beginning of like February. Yeah. So although you kind of get like a pre-dawn kind of a thing.
Yeah,
going for a
it
little
looks
while.
like it's kind of gonna rise, like the sky will start to turn kind of purple, but then it just goes back to
Yeah. So there's a famous movie called 30 Days of Night where, in a fictional version of Barrow, vampires descend on the town during the time when there's no sunlight. 'Cause where else would you go if you're a vampire? Like a place where there's no sunlight. So, pretty good movie. I'm assuming you've seen the movie. So, I know it wasn't filmed in Barrow, Alaska. So, yeah.
I think they got some establishing shots.
So Barrow, Alaska is famous for that, and it's also famous for the place where the famous humorist and essayist Will Rogers died. So he died there in an airplane crash. So they named the airport. So yeah. So anyway, so if you're up there in like Barrow, Alaska, right? You know, they eat a lot of like blubber and other kinds of things. It does help keep you warm. So if you're in the tundra, you might want to consider
I'll think about it.
maybe yeah. It meant the difference between life or death. I think.
I freeze under 75 degrees anyway, so I probably wouldn't even make it off the airplane.
Yeah. So. What's the coldest you got there?
Wind chill probably like maybe 60.
Oh my god.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's at what, like 62, 63 degrees north latitude?
I also want to say so. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. You can see the Arctic Ocean.
Yeah. Yeah, 'cause you're pretty much on the Arctic Ocean. So it's the most northerly inhabited U.S. city, right? It's like the second or third like northerly inhabited city in North America, right?
Yeah, well, it's a Barrow satellite villages.
Yeah.
Covered the ranges of Bedford, and just if you want cop for a village of 30 people.
Yeah.
It's really it's like
Yeah.
West Coast.
I know, like up in like the northern territory in Alaska, or Canada, there's like a couple of places that are technically higher up. Yeah, so I don't know if anyone would get there. I got a job offer to work at the Antarctic Research Station to be like a counselor for everybody down there. I'm like, who's gonna take care of my mental health? Because I'm gonna get pretty depressed.
You get active.
Yeah, so because you literally can't go outside and there's no sun for a while, so,
Thank God for telehealth.
yeah, so, yeah. But they like having somebody actually. It was a tempting job, because it paid like 100 G's plus room and board. So like, everything I made would have like just gone into the bank, because like, I would have had a place to eat. And
Would have had to be a really nice room though.
Yeah.
Spending so
Yeah,
much
it's
time
okay.
in it.
So, yeah. It's not the Ritz-Carlton. Okay, so make sure you know what CCK does. Don't worry about what substances the stomach can absorb, which is basically water, aspirin, a few other things. Do make sure you know what chyme is. Make sure you know like the stuff that's secreted by the pancreas. So pancreas produces like pancreatic enzymes, and it also produces bicarbonate ion, which neutralizes the stomach acid. Make sure you know some of the main functions of the liver, right? So detoxification and transformation, and also produces bile, right? So bile is not produced in the gallbladder; it's just simply stored in the gallbladder. Okay. What is the function of bile?
To break down fat.
Emulsify fat. Right? So look for emulsify. You see emulsify, that's bile. Make sure you know the three regions of the small intestine in order. So the first one is the duodenum, second part is the jejunum, and then the final part is the ileum. Right? So duodenum, jejunum, ileum in that order. Easy way to remember is remember the ileocecal valve. Right? So that's the boundary between the small intestine and large intestine. That's how I always remembered it when I took this class all those years ago. So that's really what makes anatomy. The concepts really aren't that hard, it's just the memorization, as you guys have figured out. It's just trying to remember. So the concepts aren't that difficult. Be always like is anatomy. I'm like it's not rocket science. So it's just a lot of memorization. So I tell people if I can learn this stuff, I can do it. Parts of the large intestine. So you got the cecum, ascending colon, transverse colon, descending colon, sigmoid, rectum, and anal cavity or anal colon. What are the main functions of the large intestine?
Oh, it's bulk forming.
Form, bulk, waste, and fluid and electrolyte balance.
Was that listed? Sorry, I'm trying to write it down.
What are you asking?
I was just trying to see if it was listed on here. I'm just taking notes, but
Yeah.
it's hard to keep up.
Describe the general function of the large intestine. Right. So
Oh.
form, bulk, waste, with the fluid and electrolyte balance. Right. No, there's really nothing about the major events of defecation. Really, it's just right, you get a signal from the brain. So the brain releases a chemical called gastrin. Gastrin just kind of gets the whole digestive tract going. So one of the ways to help get people to have a bowel movement is to eat. So if you're having trouble having a bowel movement, eating oftentimes can help people because it forces things to move. So unless you've got an impacted bowel, Anybody knows anybody's had a bowel obstruction or impacted bowel? Yeah. So you got to go to the hospital and they gotta basically they sedate you, dilate your rectum, and then they kind of root around in there and dig it out. So yeah, happens a lot. Yeah.
That's like first year stuff, right?
Yeah. That's what a lot of the techs are doing and often. So.
Do we need to know the gastroileal reflex or any of that?
Yeah, so the gastroileal reflex, that's the gastroileal reflex. So once food leaves the small intestine, goes into the cecum, that's going to stimulate bowel movements to cause the defecation reflex. Because you don't want to get backed up and then you end up with a bowel obstruction. But for lots of reasons, stuff goes wrong all the time. So especially as you go to a proctologist's office, it's mostly old people. So, and then but the only medical profession that absolutely loved the OxyContin epidemic was the proctology department. Business was a booming. It was a whole bunch of people hooked on oxy and they couldn't poop. So they ended up with a lot of bowel obstructions. Not fun. And they convinced us that was not going. Yeah, it was the one opioid that wasn't going to do all of that stuff. It was the opioid you could take as much. Don't worry about the importance of carbohydrates, monosaccharides in the diet. They are important for the bacteria, in your gut wall. Same thing with cellulose. There's one question about lipids in the diet, protein in the diet. Just know that, right? You have an essential protein and fat intake, but you don't have an essential carbohydrate intake. So you, in theory, taking 0 carbohydrates for the rest of your life and you'd be fine. Your life would be sad, but you could technically do it. Do you know the difference between fat-soluble and water-soluble vitamins? There is one question about each. So the fat-soluble would be what, guys? Vitamins A, D, E, and K. And then the water-soluble would be what? B and C. What's the difference between fat-soluble and water-soluble, guys, other than the fact that they're fat-soluble and water-soluble? What happens if you take too much fat-soluble vitamins?
You can overdose on it.
You get sick, right? You can overdose on it, right? So you can very easily get a vitamin E overdose or a vitamin A overdose. Vitamins B and C, it's almost impossible to get in too much of it because you'll just
pee it
flush
out.
it out through your urinary system. So it'll just give you very expensive pee. And there's really no questions about minerals, but those are important. Any questions about the digestive? No?
Did you say the water-soluble vitamins were vitamins
B and C. So B and C are the water-soluble, A, D, E, and K are the fat-soluble. There's literally one question about them.
ADEK,
So
ED, or ADEK.
don't devote a lot of time to it, but still. So there is one other difference on the final exam. So the final exam is going to be 12 bonus questions instead of 6 bonus questions. So if you get every single question right on this exam, you could get as much as 248 out of 200 possible points. Right, so I've seen people like nail the final exam and go up like 5 or 6 percentage points on their grade. So how many of you guys are planning on doing a paper?
I'm gonna see.
I'm always amazed, like it's always like a lot, like consistently the students that already have an A are the ones that do the extra credit paper. Like you already have like a 96%, like I think you're good.
I'm gonna see if I'm running that line.
You know,
If
we
not,
don't
you're
have
gonna
like
get a
an
very-
A- A+ system here, like it's just you either get an A or an
I'm gonna get a very rushed paper come Thursday if not.
When I was getting my undergrad, one of my professors, he taught exercise physiology, but he was also like the main statistician for the department. And he taught a lot of like doctoral level like statistical analysis classes. And he would grade his exams on a curve, right? So to get an A in his class, on his paper, you had to be 2 standard deviations above the average grade in the class. So you didn't just have to do well, you had to do significantly better than everyone else in the class. So you had 5 exams, and if you got an A on the first 4, you didn't have to take the final exam.
That's
But
kind of
statistically speaking, you were guaranteed an A.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I didn't have to take the final exam.
How do you grade participation, by the way? Because it's on the Canvas. But
You guys got it, so.
Okay, so it's just auto.
So,
I've been trying to calculate my
Yeah.
grade, but I don't know.
so I'm not sure about Lorraine, she might not get it. She called me old, so.
I'll text her and let her know.
So if you call me old, you may not get it. So, yeah. But yeah, you guys basically get it. So I throw in again. I just want you guys to learn biology. Like I don't care about grades all that much. Like I'd rather you guys focus more on learning the material instead of sweating about like every minor detail. Like when I used to teach 201, 202, like I would you guys might know I tell stories a lot, right? But I'm telling stories on not just a ramble. Like I'm telling you guys a story to help you guys illustrate the point of stuff, and they would be like, "Is this going to be on the exam?" No, but pay attention. Like I'm trying to teach you guys stuff. Like you might actually need to know this stuff in the future. So I don't want you guys to stress about grades. I just want you guys to learn biology. So I throw a bunch of stuff in there to make it easier for you guys to get like a decent grade. So. All right, questions on respiration. So first off, what's the difference between respiration and ventilation? And where do they occur?
Respiration is
Gas exchange, which happens in the alveoli. The rest of the system is doing ventilation, the bulk flow of air due to pressure gradients. Yes? Yeah. It's in there somewhere. Function of the sinuses are what? There's 2 functions for the sinuses. Number 1, they humidify and moisturize the air, and then they lighten the skull. And as a side effect, they also act as a resonance chamber we talked about, right? That's why when you hear a recording of your voice, it sounds very different than to you, right? Because you're listening to the sound of your voice through your own skull. I remember the first time I heard a recording of my voice. That's what it sounded like. How do vocal cords produce sound? There's really no question about it, but how do vocal cords produce sound, guys?
Vibration.
The vibration that puts sound waves through the air. Right, so what happens when you like huff helium?
Your voice goes up.
Why does your voice sound higher?
That I don't know. Does it paralyze them?
Huh? Doesn't tighten the vocal cords. Is helium lighter or denser than air? Lighter. So because it's lighter, the sound waves are traveling faster, so they're traveling right. So on the other end of the spectrum, you can huff. It's called sodium hexafluoride. So you consume. So this is a common, or we use this all the time in movies and television. So like you want to portray somebody as being demonic or possessed by a devil, right? You have them huff some sodium hexafluoride, and they'll spit their lines and they'll sound demonic. Right? So they get that demon voice, right? Because sodium hexafluoride is denser than air, so it goes through at a slower frequency.
Cool.
Okay. So that's why your voice sounds funky and it's tough. Yeah. You could huff hydro. Let's see. There's like one question about the bronchi, right? So like just basically trace the map. So you got primary bronchi, secondary bronchi, terminal bronchi. Know that gas diffusion or
Is that the bronchial
respiration
tree?
happens inside the alveoli, AC membranes. Make sure you know the lungs are located in the thoracic cavity. Right, your right lung is slightly bigger than your left lung. Do make sure you know your the tidal volume, IRV, ERV. Just know the values. And we talked about those. So like tidal volume is 500 milliliters, IRV is 1200, ERV is like 2100. So vital capacity is like 5,000. There's like 1 or 2 questions about it, but do know it.
Say vital capacity?
Yeah.
I didn't see. Okay.
So vital capacity would be like, if you took like a maximum breath in, a maximum breath out, like how much can your lungs actually like intake and exhale? So if you combine them all together, that's your vital capacity.
What was the number for that?
It's like 5,000
5,000. And you said milliliters for all?
milliliters, yeah. 4 or 5 liters.
Or what?
4 or 5 liters, 5,000
Oh,
milliliters of it. Yeah. But in the test, it's going to be milliliters. Yeah. If you can exhale 5,000 liters of air, that would be, you'd be like Superman. Superman. Yeah.
Wait, what was the residual volume?
Residual volume would be what would be left over. There's no question about it, but it's about 1,000 milliliters.
Okay.
That's why we talk about like bodies will float to the surface even after you drown. Because there's still air inside the lung cavity at the bottom of your lungs. So for a long time, the gold standard for like body fat measurements was called hydrostatic weighing. It was literally a dunk tank, so we put you in a basket and we would weigh you before putting you in the water, and then weigh you after you're in the water. So when you get in the water, then you have to breathe out like all of your air, and then that measures the density, right? Because what's the difference between mass and weight, guys? Gravity on that mass, right? So your mass is the same whether you're here or on Mars, but you weigh less on Mars, right? So when we measure you in a dunk tank, right, we're just measuring your body mass, right? So muscle is denser than fat, right? So, but it's really difficult to do. So now we just use a DEXA scan, which is a lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
So it gets us even better results. But so like it's really hard to do because you got to really breathe out like all the air. That's right. It's really hard to do that because you start freaking out like you're gonna drown. Yeah. So it's not very good. People aren't very comfortable in water. I learned that from watching. So back in the 1980s, there was a television show called American Gladiators.
Oh gosh.
Greatest television show
It was
ever.
so good.
Yeah.
I think they tried to bring it back
They
though.
did bring it back, yeah.
I don't
And
imagine
at the
it's
end of
the
every
same.
episode of American Gladiators would be an obstacle course, and there was a swimming portion. And I'm like, I realized like the average person isn't very good at swimming. Like I thought everybody would like knew how to swim. And, like half the contestants were basically like doggy paddles, didn't know how to swim. Make sure you know those laws, right? So we talked about like Boyle's law.
Where is it?
Charles' law, Dalton's law. So make sure you know those laws that we talked about.
Where was that?
We talked about respiration. Right, so Boyle's law states that there's an inverse relationship between temperature and between volume and pressure. Charles' law states that as the pressure of a gas increases, its solubility increases. That's why like people get decompression sickness or the bends. So when you dive, right? So what is our air mostly made of? Nitrogen, right? So at atmosphere, at sea level, right? Nitrogen doesn't dissolve into our system, but you dive deep, right? Pressure increases incrementally, and the nitrogen starts to dissolve into your bloodstream, right? So, anybody here ever gone scuba diving? So it goes right. So there's 2 cardinal rules. Number 1, never hold your breath. Changing elevation, and that's why they have like complicated dive tables. So if you dive to such and such depth, right? So the deeper you go, the less time you can actually be down there, right? So you can spend a lot of time close to the surface, or a little bit of time really deep. Because the longer you're down there, the more nitrogen starts to get in your system, and then you have like descent rates, right? So like you're like a deep sea diver, like salvage diver, like you have to come up slow, very slowly, right, to prevent the decompression sickness.
That's what the bends is, right?
That's what the bend is, yeah. So, yeah.
What was the third law?
So that's Charles' law, and then Dalton's law states that the partial pressure, so if you have a gas that's a mixture, like air is a gas mixture, right? So at sea level, it's 760 millimeters of mercury is the pressure of air at sea level, okay? Air is 20% oxygen, right? So the partial pressure of gas is of oxygen is gonna be 180 millimeters of mercury, right? Remember we talked about this, right? That's why, like, if you're in an airplane at altitude, like, you can't breathe, right? So because the partial pressure drops to a point where the partial pressure inside of your capillaries is higher than the partial pressure in the lungs, so there's nothing to drive oxygen from the lungs into the capillaries. So it's Boyle's law, Charles' law, and Dalton's law.
You said Boyle's law was inverse relation to what?
Boyle's law is inverse relationship between volume and pressure, right? Pull back the syringe, right? Air or fluid goes in there, just creating more volume, right? So we talked about, like, right, if you breathe in, chest cavity expands, what now happens? The pressure inside my lungs is now lower than atmospheric pressure, air rushes in. I exhale, chest volume goes down, pressure is now greater in my lungs, I exhale the air. Charles' law is what causes gases to be suspended in liquid. All of you guys are very familiar with Charles' law. Take a can of soda, open it up, what happens? Shh, right? You hear, right? Soda is what? A carbonated beverage, right? It bubbles because with what's in it? Carbon dioxide. You put carbon dioxide into it to give it that effervescent kind of feeling, right? But if you leave a can of Coke out too long, what happens?
Go flat.
It goes flat, right? And then Dalton's law explains why the partial pressure of oxygen is relatively low. So we have a very narrow, like, altitude range that we can function, right? So, like, if you were in an airplane that's 70,000 feet in the air up in the stratosphere and it decompressed, like, you got a matter of seconds to put a mask on.
What was Dalton's again?
That's Dalton's law.
I mean, Charles.
Dalton's law states that in a gas mixture, the partial pressure of any gas is proportional to its total. So air is 20% oxygen, so its pressure is going to be 20% of what the total pressure is. So the partial pressure of oxygen is relatively low at sea level, which is why so South Park, the show, is based off of a real town in Colorado called South Park, Colorado. South Park, Colorado is almost 11,000 feet up. If you were to go there, you'd have trouble catching your breath because the air pressure is going to be half of what the air pressure is at sea level. Right? So it's not that there's less oxygen, there's just less pressure gradient driving the oxygen into your bloodstream. Right? And if you went to anything above about 30,000 feet, the pressure differential is the same. And if you go anything above that, it's going to be, right? So, like, if you're in, like, you know, and the stratosphere at 70,000 feet, it's literally going to suck the air out of your lungs because the pressure gradient is going to be in negative in the wrong direction. Right, so partial pressures, right? So what drives O2 from the alveoli into the capillaries? Pressure gradient. The partial pressure of the O2 in your capillary or your alveoli is greater than the partial pressure in your capillaries, and what's going to drive the CO2 out of your capillaries into your alveoli is, again, the partial pressure. The partial pressure of CO2 in your capillaries is greater than in your lungs, right? Things get moved because of pressure gradient. So oxygen offloads into the body, and CO2 offloads out of the body due to those partial pressure gradients, right? But because of Dalton's law, right, the partial pressure of oxygen is relatively low at sea level. It gets increasingly lighter as we go up in altitude. Two ways that oxygen is transported in the blood. There's like one question about it. Just know that what transports oxygen in the blood? Hemoglobin. That's all you need to know. So you have globin strep. Okay. Kidneys, where are the kidneys located? Make sure you know that. They are located in the retroperitoneal space. Make sure you know that because there is at least one question specifically about the retroperitoneal space.
The first one?
Right, so where does filtration happen? Which region of the kidney? The medulla or the cortex? Filtration happens in the cortex. Drainage happens in the medulla, right? So the nephrons are found in the cortex, and then the collecting ducts go into the medulla, right? So filtration happens in the cortex, and then the filtrate is moved into the medulla, and then from the medulla into the major calyces to the minor calyces to the major calyces to the renal pelvis to the ureter to the bladder to the urethra, and then it's evacuated out of the body. Blood supply, right? So you've got the renal artery to the interlobar, arcuate, and interlobular, and then to the efferent arterial. There's like one question about it, but it's in it.
You said interlobar is first, and then
Interlobar, arcuate, and then interlobular. Yeah. Lobar, arcuate, lobular. And then, so basically, like, if you can track, like, the path, right, so it goes into the glomerulus of the Bowman's capsule, then it goes into the PCT, descending Lubihenle, ascending Lubihenle, PCT, and then collecting duct. So there's like one or two questions about it. Trace it, as long as you know that.
PCT.
Yeah. So when I say this, right, you guys have figured this out, I know, right? When I say describe, like, there's never a question where you actually have to describe it, but if you can describe these things to somebody, you know the material pretty well. You guys have figured out by now, like, how you guys need to, I shouldn't have to tell you guys now how to study for this. You guys have figured out the best way for you guys to study for this material.
I think you went over, sorry, the location and the structure of the kidneys.
The kidneys are found where, guys? Retroperitoneal space.
Thank you.
Yeah, so there's literally one question about it, that's exactly that.
Okay, thank you.
How do we increase net filtration? Increase blood pressure, right? By vasodilating the efferent artery. So it's gonna be one of those questions again, like which of the following increases or decreases? Right, there'll be 3 decreases, 1 increases, or 3 increases, 1 decreases. Okay. You guys are pretty smart, as you figured out right now, like which of these is not like the other 3? That one.
So that was like when you vasodilate like the afferent going into
afferent,
the blood
yeah.
glomerulus. Okay.
All right, do make sure you know like what renin, angiotensin, and aldosterone do. So those are antidiuretics versus A&P, which is actually a diuretic.
Which one's the diuretic?
So A&P is an actual diuretic. Natriuretic.
It's ANP.
A&P, atrial natriuretic peptide.
M.
It's the only one that's actually causes diuresis. Don't really worry about this. So the only thing you need to know about urine is it's 95% water, 5% waste. That's really all you need to know.
You said what?
The only thing you need to know about urine is it's 95% water, 5% waste. There's like one question about it. Don't sweat it too much. Do you know what the trigone is? Trigone is what measures pressure.
What is that?
The rest of it you don't really need to worry about. Reproductive system, make sure you know, number 1, the gonads. So the male gonads would be the testes, the female gonads would be the ovaries.
Hang on, can you slow down?
Yeah.
I'm like, thanks. Okay.
Process is spermatogenesis, right? So you start off with a spermatogonia, spermatogenesis, and then a spermatid. Do make sure you know what that kind of that shower cap on the head of the sperm is called? Acrosome. There'll be a question about the acrosome. Make sure you know what that is.
What'd you say?
Huh?
What'd you say? Sorry.
So the cap that's on the head of the spermatozoa, it's called the acrosome. Make sure you know that, because there is one question about it.
Acrosome?
Acrosome.
ACROSOME.
Yep. Spelled phonetically. Because it's Latin. Latin actually makes sense in this. Unlike English, which has ridiculous amount of homophones. You guys know what a homophone is?
Words that sound the same but
What
have
does it
different
sound
meanings.
like deer and deer? Like deer. Or steak and steak?
Isn't that what makes our language one of the hardest to learn?
Yes. Yeah.
That and Mandarin, I think.
I think we should dumb.
Yeah.
If I have more than one box, what do I have, guys?
Boxes.
Boxes. But if I have more than one ox, I have oxen.
Mm-hmm.
And more than one deer, I have deer.
Yeah.
What's the plural of moose? Is it moose?
Yeah.
Pretty
Plural
sure.
moose is moose, yeah.
Makes no sense.
Yeah. If I have more than one goose, I have geese. But if I have more than one moose, I have mooses. My favorite though is the plural for crows. You guys know what the plural for crows is?
Is it like a bunch
If you
of
have
them?
more than one crow, what do you have, guys?
It's a murder.
You have a murder of crows.
Murder?
Murder of crows. I have a friend of mine who's got a shirt that's 2 crows and it says attempted murder.
That's awesome.
English is dumb. It's a dumb language. Don't really need to know anything about the structure of the epididymis. Do know the path for sperm. So epididymis, the vas deferens, seminal vesicle, prostate, bulbourethral gland. Do make sure you know what's like in semen. So semen is spermatozoa plus alkaline plus fructose. Do make sure you know the 2 parts of the penis. So you've got the corpus cavernosa and the corpus spongiosum. Make sure you know those 2.
Hang on. Sorry. I'm trying to figure out because they're not numbered where it is. Sorry, can you?
Spinosum?
Corpus spongiosum and corpus cavernosum. So the cavernosum is the part with all that fills with blood, and that's what causes the penis to become erect. And then the under part, where you find a lot of the blood vessels, is the corpus spongiosum.
You said what was the makeup of what was it? Semen? I think.
So semen is going to be sperm, alkalines, fluids, and fructose, basically.
Okay.
Alkalines?
Yeah, and prostaglandins. There's like one question about it, so don't sweat. What do the prostaglandins do, guys? You guys remember that from like an hour ago? They stimulate the uterine walls to contract to suck the sperm up, thus increasing the likelihood of fertilization.
So sperm, alkaline fluids, and what?
Alkaline fluids and prostaglandins.
And fructose.
And fructose, yeah. Fructose is the food supply for the sperm.
Okay. Bless you. Bless you. Okay, that's enough.
2 grams of fructose. They've actually measured this stuff. Like there's somebody that's their job. What do you do? Oh. Analyze semen.
Wonder what makes someone want to do that.
Job. People become proctologists. Crappy job, but somebody did it. All right, so hormones that regulate both the female and the female reproductive system. Gonadotropic releasing hormone, FSH, and LH. Same for both male and female reproductive systems.
What was the first one?
Gonadotropic releasing hormone, GnRH. What you're going to see on the exam, GnRH. So the hypothalamus releases GnRH, and then the pituitary gland releases FSH and LH. LH tells the ovaries to produce estrogen and progesterone, tells the testes to produce testosterone, and then FSH tells the ovaries to ovulate and tells the testes to make sperm. Both start at puberty. The only, so for the reproductive cycle, just know that ovulation occurs day 14. Right, that's the standard answer we get on any exam. Know that the corpus luteum produces HCG. You make sure you know the 3 layers of the uterus. So the inner layer is the endometrium, the muscular layer is the myometrium, and the outer layer is the parametrium. There's no questions on contraceptive. We didn't get a chance to talk about that. We can talk about that real quick if you want to before we go. Mammary gland, right? Just it's a modified sweat gland that produces milk and fat. So you have the mammary glands, and then the alveolar ducts. That's all you need to know about the mammary glands. Do you guys have questions about contraception? What's the only 100% effective forms of birth control, guys?
Abstinence.
Number 1, abstinence. Number 2, what? Hysterectomy. Right, so if you don't have the parts, then you can't get a baby, right? So there's only a couple documented cases of people that haven't had sex, having kids. One of them is Osiris's mom, the other's Mary. Right? Then you have the rhythm method. What's the rhythm method, guys? Keep track of your menstrual cycle, and when you know you're ovulating, you abstain from sex. What's the efficacy rate of the rhythm method? About 70%, so it's not bad. And then so how does condoms work, guys?
Trap the sperm.
Provides a
Or
physical
semen.
barrier to prevent the semen from going up into the uterine lining. How effective are condoms when used properly?
Like 80-something%.
About 97, 98% effective. You also have like sponges and cervical dams, right?
Do people use those still?
They still are on the market.
Yeah.
So how do sponges and cervical dams work, guys?
Create a physical barrier.
Literally creates same thing. Creates a physical barrier, right? You actually insert it up into the vagina, and then you place it on top of the cervix. Same thing. It has about a 97, 98% effective rate. And then you have various different oral contraceptives. So how do oral contraceptives, aka the pill, work, guys?
Doesn't it mess with your
It
hormones?
tricks the body into
so it
thinking you're
thinks
pregnant.
it's
So
pregnant?
when birth control first came out, you only got 14 pills, right? So half the month it convinced you that you're already pregnant, and then the other half the month you would just have your menstrual cycle. That didn't work very well because people forgot to take their pills, and it became right. So now what do you got, ladies? Get anybody in here take oral contraceptives, aka the pill? Anybody have at some point in their life taken the pill, right? So you get a case that gets what? How many pills are in it?
Well, there's like the placebo pills now.
Yeah, usually it's got 30 pills, right? So half the pills literally do nothing, but they give you a pack of 30 because otherwise you forget to take them, right? So half the pills are just like a placebo pill. So you got oral contraceptives, and then you got other types of hormonal. So for example, like Norplant, right? If you put it in your arm, it basically makes you're pregnant 24 hours a day. And then you have IUDs, which should not be confused with IEDs. If you have an IED inside of you, you should go to the hospital. That's very bad. What is an IUD, guys?
It's where it goes up into the cervix.
Interuterine device, right? So there are 2 types of IUDs, hormonal and non-hormonal. Hormonal are going to do what? Also help convince you, right? What's the main reason why somebody would take hormone-based oral contraceptives or hormonal IUDs? Help regulate their menstrual cycle. So if you have a menstrual cycle that's crazy all over the place, like a hormonal-based IUD can mellow it out, smooth it out. And then there's non-hormonal IUD. What do non-hormonal IUDs do?
It's a physical barrier.
So they don't provide a physical barrier. What they do is, an IUD will not prevent you from getting pregnant, but it will prevent the fertilized egg from implanting inside of the uterine lining. Right? So you can technically still get pregnant, but but the fertilized egg won't implant inside the uterus.
Would that run up the risk of like an ectopic pregnancy where it inserts?
It does slightly increase the risk of an ectopic pregnancy, which is where you right, so you fertilize inside the fallopian tubes, but sometimes it stays in the fallopian tubes, and then the embryo starts to develop, and then eventually it'll rupture the fallopian tube, right? What's the effective rate of oral contraceptives, IUD? Oral contraceptives, same thing, about 95 to 98% effective. IUDs are about 99% effective. So the only two foolproof ways to not get pregnant are, number one, abstinence, or have a hysterectomy, or have sex with somebody who has had a hysterectomy. Everything else is going to have a less than 100% chance of preventing pregnancy. What will prevent STDs?
Abstinence.
Abstinence, right? So even condoms are not 100% effective for preventing STIs. They are about, if used properly, about a 99+% chance of preventing STIs, but you have to use them properly, which means what? Use them for both oral as well as other forms of intercourse. So if you really want to 100% make sure that you're not going to get an STI, be abstinent or use a condom for literally any type of intercourse if you're having, intercourse with somebody that's got these. Any questions on anything, guys? No.
Since we're
Good
not
luck
playing
this
Jeopardy.
weekend, guys. So remember, Tuesday, you guys will come in, you guys will take the exam, and then you guys are done. Congratulations.
Since we're not playing Jeopardy, are we not getting bonus points?
Huh?
I said since we're not playing Jeopardy, are we not getting bonus points?
You guys still get the bonus points.
You're the best, thanks.
You gonna have to put it in?
I'll put them in. So
Oh my
if not,
gosh.
you'll remind me at the gym.
I will.
Do you go to the same gym?
Yeah, I run into them all the time.
Oh,
We're at
really?
the gym.
That's funny.
I still gotta take the digestive.
Yes.
Okay.